I was talking to an old friend I haven't heard from in ages, and they brought up this story, so I thought I'd share it. I used to work at Dillard's in the children's department, so I saw my fair share of entitled behavior from our customers, but this incident happened to my co-worker. A customer was browsing around with her 4 to 5 year old son. He was running around, knocking things off racks, etc. The mother made no effort to control him until he crashed into her a couple of times. She told him to go sit in one of the chairs by the dressing rooms. The chairs were pretty nice and upholstered in a silk-like fabric. My co-worker was removing garments left in the changing rooms, and as she passed by the little boy, she noticed he was pushing a small car around all over the back of the chair, and it was shredding the fabric. She spoke to the boy and asked him not to do that. He responded by blowing a raspberry at her and pushed the car with even more force. She went to the mother and asked if she could speak to her son about destroying the chair with his little car. The mother stopped and looked at my co-worker. They stood there just looking at each other for what my co-worker described as too long and very awkward. The mother asked her what she expected her to do about it. My co-worker started to explain that she just wanted her to ask the boy to stop, but before she could finish the sentence, the mother slapped her across the face with the hangers she was holding. So hard it broke a hanger. Now I would have beat the crap out of that woman right then and there. Job be screwed. My co-worker just turned around and went to find our manager. She first encountered an off-duty police officer who worked security in the store and told him what happened. He went with her to the manager. The manager went over to the mother, listened to her rant, and did something unbelievable. He apologized to her for the misunderstanding and gave her a 10% discount for her troubles. My co-worker was so stunned she couldn't even speak. Even the cop was saying, "What the heck just happened?" The cop turned to my co-worker and asked if she wanted to press charges. Before she could answer, the manager interrupted and said that wouldn't be necessary. Meanwhile, all the other employees in the department are watching all this go down, and I had just walked back in from my break. I see my co-worker has a huge welt across her face and is bleeding under her eye. My co-worker told the cop she did in fact want to press charges. The manager told her she couldn't do that if she wanted to keep her job. She told him that was fine and she quit. The manager was still insistent that the mother not be troubled by all this. The cop told him that the woman could have put her eye out and he was arresting her, and if the manager didn't like it, he could take it up with his commander. The entitled mother was still acting smug until she saw the cuffs. Then she started screaming that she was going to sue all of us, that she'd have his badge, and demanding to know if we knew who she was. No one but the manager cared and she still went to jail. All of the other employees and customers who were watching clapped as she was being led out of the store in cuffs. The manager started lecturing the employees about how to deal with situations like what had happened. We all looked at each other and without saying a word, we all clocked out and left. All of us. Good luck running the entire department by yourself. We hung around our injured co-worker until she was done with the police report and then took her to lunch. She said she'd been planning to apply at a different store in the same mall anyway, but hadn't planned on quitting the way it happened and worried that Dillard's would give her bad reference now. We convinced her to go to the other store right then, injured face and all. She explained what happened to the manager there. She was hired on the spot and was told that they don't put up with crap like that. If a customer hits you, no matter who they think they are, charges will be filed and they will be permanently banned from the store. I spoke to my cop friend a few days later and he said the crazy woman nearly drove him insane with her screaming and threats on the way to the jail. After she saw that wasn't working, she started with pleading and bribery. He said he didn't think he'd ever been so glad to hand someone off to booking. All this happened ages ago, and since that day, I've never stepped foot in a Dillard's. A few years back, I was 20 and working for one of the biggest hotel chains in the world. The pay was incredible. I was taking home thousands of dollars a month, which felt like winning the lottery at my age. I had started during the summer and was loving every minute of it. Come winter of that same year, it was 2 days before Christmas and things were pretty slow. There was just me and another guy working the front drive that day. I was tired and wanted to head home early, so I told my coworker he could take his break while I handled things alone for a bit. Out of nowhere, this truck came speeding around the corner and pulled into our driveway. The driver stopped right in the middle of the drive in a way that would completely block any other cars trying to get through. I looked over at the truck but decided not to approach right away since they didn't seem to need help. The windows stayed up and nobody got out. A few minutes passed and another car pulled up behind the truck. I walked over to help the second driver and gave them directions to our parking garage. But that truck still hadn't moved an inch. I knew I had to do something about it. I approached the truck and tried to get the driver's attention, but they wouldn't roll down their window. The windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside at all. I tapped gently on the glass and heard some mumbled response from inside. I politely asked if she could roll down her window so I could hear her better. The window finally came down and I found myself face to face with this angry-looking woman who seemed ready for a fight. She immediately started yelling at me, demanding to know what I wanted and telling me not to touch her car. I was caught off guard by her attitude but tried to stay professional. I apologized and explained that she was blocking the driveway, asking if she could please pull forward so other guests could get through. She just rolled her window back up and sat there. I stood there for a moment, not believing what had just happened. I tapped on the window again thinking maybe she just needed a reminder. She got out of the truck. This woman was almost a foot shorter than me, but she walked right up and pressed her chest against my stomach like she was trying to intimidate me. Then she started screaming about how I should get away from her car and demanding to know who I thought I was telling her what to do. She said she would park wherever she wanted. I tried to calm her down, asking her to step back and lower her voice while explaining that I was just trying to do my job. But she kept pushing against me and yelling profanities. I tried to stay calm and kept asking her to back off and leave me alone. She wasn't having any of it. After a few moments of this, I extended my arms to create some space between us. I made sure to be as gentle as possible. I didn't want to hurt her or make things worse. But then she completely lost it. She started swinging at my face, scratching and punching me. She knocked my glasses right off my face and threw punches at my stomach. At one point, she even grabbed onto my leg like she was trying to drag me down with her. I got upset. I was still trying to keep my cool, but I had to defend myself. I put her in a front-facing headlock just to restrain her until help could arrive. While all this was happening, her daughter came out of nowhere and started attacking me from behind with punches, and even tried to get me in a headlock too. I managed to hold them both off until hotel security showed up. I told my manager I was going home for the day and that I needed to press charges and get medical attention for the scratches on my face. The next day when I came back to work, my manager called me into his office. He explained that he had to suspend me pending an investigation, saying it was just corporate's dumb rules, but that I shouldn't worry about it since they had the whole thing on security cameras. I wasn't worried at all. The cameras had caught everything, so I knew the truth would come out. But a few days later, I got the call that I was being fired. Even worse, that woman and her daughter had pressed assault charges against me. When we got to court, these two didn't even have real lawyers. They were sitting in the courtroom laughing and making jokes like this was all some big game to them. My defense lawyer had requested the security footage and brought it as evidence. When the judge saw the video, all charges against me were dropped immediately. But the story doesn't end there. The district attorney decided to pick up assault charges against both of them. They were offered something called probation before judgment, which would have kept them out of jail. But they turned it down and demanded a jury trial instead. They kept showing up to court sessions laughing and giggling like they thought this was all hilarious. They had to use a public defender since they couldn't afford their own lawyer. When the case went to trial, the jury got to see the security video that backed up my story completely and destroyed theirs. But this woman still kept lying on the witness stand, claiming that I had just walked up to her and attacked her and her daughter for no reason. During the trial, I found out this was her fourth time being charged with assault, and she had never spent a single day in jail for any of it. The jury found her guilty of second-degree assault. I was invited to give a victim impact statement at her sentencing hearing. I told the judge about how I had no criminal record, how I had been working full-time to support myself through college, and how I had a beautiful baby girl who was born less than a week after I got suspended and fired because of this incident. The judge sentenced her to 2 years in prison. They put handcuffs on her right there in the courtroom. When it finally hit her that this was really happening, she started crying and sobbing and looking around desperately like she was searching for someone to save her. Our eyes met across the courtroom. I looked her straight in the face and did a full victory dance right there in my seat as they carried her away. The owner of the small coffee shop I work at is pretty cool and lets me pick up extra shifts when I need them, which has been helpful since my student loans aren't getting any smaller. Last Tuesday was supposed to be a normal morning shift. I came in at 6 to open up, got the machines running, and started prepping for the usual rush. Around 7:30, this woman walks in wearing expensive clothes and talking loudly on her phone. She had that look that screamed trouble from the moment she stepped through the door. She walked up to the counter while still on her call, not even acknowledging me standing there waiting to take her order. I waited patiently for about 30 seconds before clearing my throat and greeting her, asking what I could get started for her today. She held up one finger at me like I was interrupting something important and kept talking on her phone for another full minute. When she finally hung up, she looked at me like I had personally ruined her day. She demanded a large skinny vanilla latte with oat milk, extra hot, and said she needed it in 5 minutes because she was already running late. I told her that would be $6.50, but she immediately complained that the price was ridiculous. She said that at the coffee place near her office, the same drink only cost $5. I apologized but explained that was our price for a large specialty drink with oat milk, mentioning that the oat milk did cost a bit extra. She rolled her eyes and threw her credit card on the counter. I started making her drink, making sure to get everything exactly right because she seemed like the type who would complain about anything. While I was working, she kept checking her phone and sighing dramatically. When I finished her latte, I called out her order. She grabbed it without saying thanks and took a sip right there at the counter. She immediately complained that it was way too cold, claiming she had specifically said extra hot. She asked if we people didn't know how to follow simple instructions. The thing is, I had made it extra hot. Steam was literally still coming off the top, but I've learned not to argue with difficult customers. I apologized and offered to remake it for her. I took the cup back and added some more steamed milk to make it even hotter. When I handed it back to her, she took another sip and shook her head. She complained it still wasn't hot enough and now tasted watered down. She demanded a completely new drink and said she shouldn't have to pay for my mistakes. At this point, other customers were starting to line up behind her, and I could see them getting impatient. I made her a third latte, this time making it so hot that I was worried she might actually burn herself. She seemed satisfied with the temperature but complained that she had wasted 15 minutes of her time because of my incompetence. She demanded to speak to my manager. I apologized but explained that the manager wouldn't be in until later that afternoon. She told me to call them right then and there. I explained that I couldn't really disturb them at home for something like this and asked if there was anything else I could do to help. She was getting more upset by the minute. Her face was turning red and she was raising her voice enough that everyone in the coffee shop was staring. She ranted about how this was the worst service she'd ever experienced, saying she was never coming back and would make sure everyone knew how terrible this place was. I said I understood she was frustrated and reminded her that I had remade her drink twice to get it exactly how she wanted it. She snapped back that wasn't the point, saying that she shouldn't have had to ask twice and that now she was late for an important meeting because of me. She walked toward the door but then stopped and turned around. She walked back to the counter with this determined look on her face. She announced that she had changed her mind and wanted her money back, claiming the whole experience had been unacceptable. I apologized but explained that I couldn't refund a drink that she had already consumed most of. She looked down at her cup, which was indeed nearly empty, then back at me. She argued that she had only drunk it because she was thirsty and running late, saying that didn't mean she was satisfied with it. I said I understood but explained that our policy was that we couldn't refund drinks that had been consumed. I offered to make her something else though. She called our policy stupid and said I was stupid too. She threatened to call corporate and have me fired. She pulled out her phone like she was going to call someone right then and there, That's when I realized she probably didn't even know this was a locally owned shop, not a chain. I told her that this was an independent coffee shop with no corporate office to call. She accused me of lying, saying that every coffee shop has a corporate office. I assured her it was true and said the owner lived here in town. I offered to give her his business card if she'd like to speak with him. She stared at me for a moment like she couldn't process what I was saying. She told me to give her the card, saying she was going to call him and tell him what a horrible employee I was. I handed her one of our business cards. She looked at it, then looked back at me with this confused expression. She noted that it said the owner's name was Mike and asked where his number was. I pointed out that it was right there on the card, but mentioned that I should probably tell her that Mike was my uncle, and he was the one who taught me how to make coffee. She just stood there with her mouth hanging open for a few seconds. She asked if I had said my uncle, sounding completely shocked. I confirmed that he was, explaining that I'd been working there since I was 16 and that he was pretty protective of his employees, especially family. She looked around the coffee shop like she was just noticing that several customers were watching this whole interaction. Then she looked back at the card in her hand. She said she was still going to call him. I told her that was fine and that his number was right there on the card. But I warned her that he wasn't usually very sympathetic to people who yell at his staff over perfectly good coffee. She stuffed the card in her purse and headed for the door again, saying that this wasn't over. She finally left, and the next customer in line shook his head and chuckled. He commented about some people and said the coffee had looked perfectly fine to him. The rest of my shift went smoothly, and I honestly forgot about the whole thing until my uncle called me that evening. Apparently, she had actually called him and spent 20 minutes complaining about my attitude and demanding that I be fired. My uncle listened to her whole rant, then explained that he had security cameras in the shop and would be happy to review the footage of their interaction. Funny thing about entitled people, they usually don't want their behavior recorded and reviewed. She quickly changed her tune and said maybe she had overreacted a little bit. My uncle told her that he stood behind his employees and that if she wasn't satisfied with the service, she was welcome to take her business elsewhere. She never came back to the shop, which was honestly a relief. But the story gets better. About a week later, one of our regular customers told me she had seen the same woman causing a scene at the grocery store, yelling at a teenage cashier over expired coupons. Apparently, some people never learn.